Hello and welcome. I am Jeremy Blake in my lumberjack shirt, and today I'm going to be interviewing Bob Morrell as he approaches a significant birthday. So, Bobby boy, I want to take you back some 34 years nearly. You're a 16-year-old, and academia hasn't quite been what it might have been.
No.
And you find yourself in your first job, and you recently wrote a blog about work ethic, and maybe you're reflecting back as your own son nears that age. But what is it that you learnt from that first job? And then we're going to have a little walk up the memory lane.
Well, I was very lucky. I got a job in an insurance company at the age of 16, 9 to 5. I also had flexi hours. It was quite advanced for that time in 1986. You had a card to key in and key out. And it meant that you could go to the pub for 2 hours most lunchtimes, which I did. So that was great. But the point of the work ethic was I had to be somewhere on time, in a suit, and I had to do something every day. And I think these days, if you have worked, if you've been a waiter, a barman, stacked shelves, if you've done some work in your youth, I think that really helps you understand what a work ethic is for later life.
So you soon realised that there was more money to be earned through another activity, which eventually brings us together in some form, and we'll get to that. So what is it that made you make the switch and enter the sales world?
Well, the reason I wanted to enter the sales world was because there was much more money in it. Because you could not only get a higher salary, but there was commission to be earned. And so I realized that this was a much more interesting way of earning money because you're talking to people, and in these days it was taking ads for a local newspaper. And then I quickly realized there was a really good publishing house near me that had a fantastic department full of people with very comfy chairs, as I remember. And I then joined a brilliant group of people who, like me, sort of found themselves in media sales, and off we went. And you're off there picking up the phone, speaking to people. And I remember probably 6 months after I joined, I had a brilliant job on a brilliant magazine, and I earned £1,100 commission in 1 month from selling. And that changed everything for me. I just thought, wow, this is what it's all about. If you're any good, you can do well. So that was it.
You wouldn't have got that from your insurance job, certainly not for some time. So
it would take me.
But there wasn't enough to keep. There you go. But it wasn't enough to keep you because the creative soul in you was a little frustrated, and so it looks like drama was beckoning. So tell me what it was that made you look for and apply to a drama school.
I went traveling, and I did Europe and the US, and I enjoyed that. It was great fun, and I sort of changed and grew as an individual. But I also thought I really want to follow a dream, and drama school was kind of, I suppose, the way of doing that. I wanted to be an actor. I thought I could do it. I'd done lots of Amdram in my youth, and it was just a sort of natural stepping stone. So I went to drama school, and which is, of course, where we met. And I had a really fascinating 2 years experience.
So indeed, I was the year above you, although I'm at least a decade younger, of course. But
Yeah.
And then you turn up and you're reading historical novels, and that fascinates me. You always like to coin that I want to know what people were wearing at certain times in history.
You did ask me that question.
Brilliant. And so you're there at drama school. I mean, because you then come back into sales, and we're going to go into that in a bit. But what is it that if you were to say to anyone who's languishing in a role, whatever age they might be, and they've got this dramatic yearning or artistic craving, are you saying on reflection that you should seek it out, or do you now look back on that differently?
It's a really good question. It was different in our day. It was proportionally still a lot of money, but nowhere near as much money as it is now. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's the difference. I think if you're wealthy, then why not? But I
Mm.
think if you're driven but you don't have the funds, it's almost impossible to go to drama school these days, and I think that's a real pity.
Yeah.
I think, however, if you want to act, if you want to be an actor, then actually you, if you're any good, you could feasibly do as well by not going to drama school as you could if you had, because you can create productions, you can do things these days. You've got the internet, you've got so many things you can do to promote yourself. I think if that's what you really want to do, you can do it, but I think you should probably think about how you could do it yourself rather than following crowds of people into drama school, which
Absolutely.
is great fun. There's no doubt about it. Drama school is brilliant fun.
Mm.
I'm just not sure it's the best way of getting what you ultimately want.
Although one could argue the entrepreneurial skills you've just talked of, you were able to apply just a few years later because you do various productions of you know limited success, and you are encouraged back into the sales world.
Mm,
And let's talk now about that period of time. You meet your wife, which is great. You go up to Edinburgh, you put on a show, you meet Emma, and
correct.
then you're starting to realize that maybe money is not to be had from the acting game.
Mm,
And
mm.
then you to develop your sales career, and you become a proper salesperson and account manager, and you have a number of great roles. When you look back at those roles before you and I reconnected and we launched this, what would you say is the best role? And I'd like to now sort of combine that with what you learnt about sales management from some sort of mentors during that period. What was your best sales role, and when did that kind of idea of managing and growing kick in?
So I had a number of really good sales roles, but my best one by far was for a company called Ziff Davis, which is a United States-based publishing firm, and I was on a magazine called PC Magazine, and it was there that I learned a completely different way to sell. So up until that point, I've been an account manager for years. I've been a manager, a team manager, sales manager, but I'd never really learned any other way to sell, any other new techniques. I had very limited training over that period. I was surviving on my wits, really. And then I had a day's training, half a day's training, really. But that training, I just thought, aha, that's it. That's the difference. And
Mm.
it was a different way of working, a different way of engaging with people. It suited my style. And I thought, okay, I now know how to do this. But also at the same time, I thought I could train this. This is something I could take this, do something with, so that other people can benefit from this knowledge, because I could see that it was how it should be done. So I
And
think
it,
that
and
was the
it
big.
wasn't, perhaps, if we talk about regional newspapers, which is your early start, it wasn't really pitching anymore. It was conversational, and maybe that
Mm.
gave you a bit of sort of creative license with language, and you're able to make the connection.
But also, I think um, if you are the type of person who really likes to interact with others and get to know them and spend time on that, then that is the most important thing, because you build relationships and that's where business grows. Um, I think especially if you're trying to do deals for large amounts of money, I don't think you can do it quick and in and out, and
Yeah.
with no real content, with no real depth.
Mm.
I think the world has definitely changed, and if you want to do big deals, you've got to have an ability to connect with people at a slightly deeper level,
Yeah.
and that appeals to me entirely. But also, it's really transferable. Once people understand that, I think it changes the way that they see selling as well.
Now, you were a victim of the dot-com bubble burst period, and you
Mm.
had some terrific experiences. So then you and I rehook up, and we're talking about I'm kind of burning out at Yellow Pages, and we come up with a kind of dream. First of all, that we'll launch our own drama school, and that
Yeah,
never happened. But then we realised that
it
perhaps
should be
we'd
fun.
form a marketing agency because the internet was still young, And
Yeah,
we got very much hooked into thinking we could grow a business out of marketing, did we not?
we did.
Um, Give somebody an insight into what we were doing and how we were trying to sell that, so somebody can get an idea of around 2002 what you
Mm.
and I are doing to try to earn a crust.
Well, we knew we wanted to get into training, but we knew it was going to take time because you can't just say we're a training company.
Yeah.
So we knew we wanted to do training, but in the meantime, we needed an income. So we came up with this idea of selling to companies marketing plans. We would go and do a marketing plan. Most of them were like 750 quid. And we'd
Mm.
create and develop a marketing plan that we'd sell to a company. And then they would either just take it and run with it, or they go, okay, and can you help us implement it? And then you agree a retainer to run their marketing for them for an indeterminate period. And that gave us an income whilst we were then trying to build up the training business. And for a while, it was pretty successful. We had a number of different types of business that paid us retainers, that we helped run their different types of advertising. We worked for some really dodgy people as well, which will form the basis of a fascinating sitcom one day. But we learned a lot about business and about marketing and about people during that period. And I think that stood us in good stead in the future when we
Partnerships.
dropped it.
We had good partnerships, people like Nikki Peach,
Yeah.
making websites. And just tell people about our lucky break, because since our biggest client had a chain of beauty salons and we were helping her grow, and we got our first gig back in what you had begun your life in, which was regional newspapers. So how can
It
you
is.
remember how we got that break?
I can remember the lady who booked us. Maybe we were speaking to them about advertising for our client,
Well,
and then realised they were so poor, and so we then managed to book a day to go in and train them, and they were dreadful.
well, we
And
did just that. We made a complaint. We said, we've just met somebody who wants to get £17,000 out of us.
yeah,
They've not discovered anything. And they said, well, hang on a minute, who are you? You better come and train them. And so
yeah,
we went off to a regional newspaper.
and I think that was a good gig to get. We also got a gig with a large insurance company in Folkestone,
Mm.
led on to
Yeah,
some
yeah.
other bits, and that sort of snowballed into other elements. But I think the other key thing there was that within a relatively short space of time, we realised that there was just much more money and much more fulfillment in doing training than there was in just continuing with the marketing. And so
So
became a point where we dropped one.
absolutely. And our accountant helped us with that decision as well, I remember. So what do you think was the appeal of training? And I have an idea of what the appeal was to you back then, and it was probably similar to me. What was the appeal of training?
What do you think the appeal was?
That it had an element of performance,
Mm-hmm.
an element of creativity, um, motivating people, these sorts of things that you would have, wisdom, you'd pass things on, you could demonstrate things. It kind of played to a number of acting, um, arguably, acting sensitivities that couldn't be addressed without going into the theatre or going into film.
I think that was totally true. I've always seen it as a performance, whether it's one
Mm.
person or 500 people. I've always seen it as a performance.
Mm.
Um, I think that was what differentiated us in the early days, if you remember. It was just you and me. We were a double act, which was unusual in that
Yeah.
marketplace. In fact, I don't know any others now who do that. And we learnt our trade by going on and getting through these days together. And we developed a
Mm.
style. It was an act, it was a double act. That's what we did. And I think it was a bit like being a comedian because you have gigs that just go okay or don't go that well or go pretty well or whatever, and you learn what's working and what isn't. And so now, 18 years on, we kind of know enough. The act is
Mm.
done. We know how
We've
to
evolved, I
say
would
the right
say.
things. We have.
we were certainly entertainers at the start. I'd say, were we not? Um,
I don't know.
you
I
know,
think they liked the act. We were
mm,
very different. You were more extrovert and ebullient and sort of
you were
children's
the
television
same.
presenter style. I was the more of the straight man, and I think that was sorry,
Which is
sorry.
ironic. I said, which is ironic.
But it's true. We had slightly different roles. We used to do that in meetings too. I remember we'd go into meetings, and you would be more enthusiastic and dead keen, and I would be slightly more. And what about this? And I think that combination worked very well, actually.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
So, let's talk about today. So, as you say, time's moved on. We've had some terrific big clients.
yeah,
We've managed to work in the United States. We've
yeah.
managed to work in India.
Mm.
What's one of the things that still motivates you these years on running a training company that is now significantly scaled? And we have a team of 12 trainers. A lot has changed, but the motivations now must be rather different to the early ones. What's the kick for you now? What's the good stuff?
That's a very good point. I remember when we first went to America, and we were both very excited about that, and we
Mm,
couldn't believe we were being paid quite a lot of money to go to America, stay in hotels, eat out,
mm,
have a bit of time free as well. It was a dream, wasn't it? If you remember those things. I remember us eating in the Carnegie Diner
yeah.
and wishing that our late fathers could be with us because they'd enjoy it so much, and they wouldn't believe what we were
No,
doing.
no.
And and since then we've travelled a lot. We've been all over the place, and it's been brilliant. Um, Part of me still enjoys that. Can't believe we're going to Turkey. Can't believe we're going to Cyprus. Can't believe we're going to Miami. Can't believe
Yeah.
we're going to all these different Los Angeles. I couldn't believe we're going to these places to work. That was
Mm,
just crazy.
mm,
And I think that's part of it, definitely. But also, I think through this job, most of our work's been in the UK, and through that, we have got to know the major towns and many of the regional towns in the UK that we probably would never have visited
no.
otherwise.
Yeah, yeah.
So we know our country really well. We know where all the best curry houses are. We know where the best pubs are. We know where the best karaoke bars are. I went to one the other night that we've been to before. We have had a
Mm.
great time in all these different towns all over the country. That's been absolutely brilliant.
How do you think that, without losing our identity and losing your identity, we're not. I mean, if you look at the field of training, there are some people who present themselves completely down the scientific route, data driven, neuroscience, psychology, rooted in fact, and we're not. We'll dip into psychology, but we're not like that. So, do you think it becomes increasingly hard for us to shape an identity in what's becoming a more corporate and we could argue science-based world?
Um, yes, I think it is harder for us to forge an identity. However, I think what we've proved is that important essence that we started with all those years ago is as important today. So
Mm,
even with our teams that we use, they're going out there delivering our training with a bit of what we started
mm,
with. That
yeah,
bit of entertainment, make it memorable, make it interesting, engage with people, get people laughing, um, make sure it is an experience that the people walk away from thinking, I've never had training like that before. That was amazing. If we can get people to feel like that,
yeah,
then actually they can do a lot of the work themselves to then bring the stuff to life. But
yeah.
I think that's part of it is that's the bit which we've managed to retain. It is harder, no doubt about it. The world's changing all the time, um, but I don't think the principles that we train have changed at all. I think the principles are still exactly the same.
No, and we want to make it fun. We pioneered event training, large groups. It's interesting that we're both married to teachers. Another thing that we share, and they'll often in my casual conversations, my wife will simply say, "Well, look, if you make learning fun, you're going to have a better chance." You know that
Well, yes,
that's
and
kind of
and
her.
being married to teachers, because we need one stable income. I think that's very key. But it does have to be fun. But also, I think there was something that you used to say in the early days, which you don't say anymore. But I think there is something which kind of runs through. So you used to talk about the fact that the training we were giving people was transformational. It could change their lives. They wouldn't have to sell advertising anymore. They could go and sell wine or things like that. And they had this sort of wonderful middle class image. And we don't make those connections anymore. But I think those people make the connections for themselves. If you learn the right skills and how to sell and how to engage with people, then you can do anything. You can work anywhere. And perhaps that's a great thing, which, through the way we deliver it, you hope it inspires people to want to, be a bit more ambitious and grow.
What's your take on the fact that we are entrepreneurs and an SME, and yet we don't deal primarily with anyone of that ilk? We are selling to people thoroughly employed, had guaranteed salaries when we look at them on LinkedIn ever since they left school or university, and those
Mm.
two mindsets clashing. Because I find, in response to my last question to you about who we are and what we stand for, I find that a challenge. I'm wondering what your take is. With any SME, you're running a business, but you're an SME, you're an entrepreneur, and yet you're selling and relying on big corporate fish, in a sense, to do your deals with.
I think if you are an entrepreneur who started your own business, one of the reasons you've done it is because you know what to do. Okay,
Mm,
you feel you know what to do. So if you start a small business and you grow it and you bring in a few people, you still know what to do, and
mm,
therefore the requirement to develop, you think, well, I can give them that because I know what to do, and I think that's part of the joy of being an entrepreneur. But however, I think you're also alluding to the fact that in recent years, you and I and Anne Harris, who's worked with us for over 11 years now, um, we have done some development ourselves,
mm.
and we have grown hugely through doing that process. And I think if entrepreneurs realised that learning is a lifelong thing, that you can continually
Yep.
develop, continually grow, then actually all businesses could hugely benefit from that investment. But
Mm,
at the same time, being an entrepreneur, if you've grown something yourself, you're very protective and you're very risk averse.
mm. Well, yes, and in our partnership, we have different styles with that, which is reasons for one of the success as well, is that you've got different characters
True.
when it comes to you know our views on life and things. So as we come to a close, we've got teenage lads, or you've got two, and I've got one. I've got two girls. They're
Yeah.
coming, into the age that you were when you started work, and we don't know quite what path they're going to take.
No.
Um, and it could be in as little as 10 years, or even less than that they could be in a position like us and thinking of starting their own things. So what do you say to people who, young people who are looking at the world going, what the hell am I going to do? I've read about this gig economy. Where do I fit? And what do you say to people who are thinking, I really don't want to go and work in a large brand. I'd like to do something a bit more off the beaten track. How would you sort of guide people in that way?
I think the opportunities to do that sort of thing are more now than they ever were. So that's the first thing. If you want to try new things, then the world is much smaller than it used to be. You can get around it much more quickly, and I think you have to be thinking in more internationally. That's my first thing.
Okay.
But I
The
also
world's
think
got
that
smaller.
yes, and we can get around, and why not? But I also think that the change in further education, especially in this country, I think for some people now, because of the economics, I
Yeah.
don't think university is in any way as attractive an option as it once was.
Okay.
And we've had direct experience of people who didn't end up going to university, got themselves an apprenticeship, got themselves a job, and are now doing really well without having that backing them up. And so I don't think that is as essential as it once was. If that's your thing, great, go and do it. But I think there's a lot to be said for trying different things, different places,
Mm.
broadening your horizons as much as you possibly can, because experience is really important. And going back to that thing I talked about earlier about work ethic, if you haven't tried different things, if you haven't understood what it is to turn up and do something and deliver and create something or just be part of something, then that becomes harder later in life the later you leave it. So I think that's the difference now. And you can always go back to education later. I did my degree years after I left school,
Absolutely.
years after drama school. And so you can always go back to education, but experience is fantastic, and who knows where it may take you, and who knows who you might meet. And most of the
Yeah.
things that you or I, the successes that we have been through people that we've met in different situations, and then coming back to us later. That's a common theme. So I think that's the difference now. Put yourself out there. And also, the ability to start a business now is much easier, much quicker than it was when even we began. So
Yeah.
again, if you've got that feeling, why not give it a go? The worst that can happen is it doesn't work and you have to get a job. But no one's going to
Exactly.
criticize you for trying.
Mm. Mm. So you've now officially outlived your father, which is a fantastic thing to have achieved.
Thank you.
And in little over a month, you're going to hit the big 5-0. So now you've achieved this kind of milestone. How much longer do you think you're going to work for in this capacity?
um, I went to
You
see a
other
talk
interests for you.
in it. What? Sorry.
Because you've got other interests. So I'm just interested now, as you go into this next phase of your life, how can you
Mm.
marry up the other interests you have while still raising boys, being married, all these other things that you have to, practically balance with future aspirations?
Good question. I went to see an author the other day who described his work ethic, and his work
Mm.
ethic was that he would write from 9 till 12 every day, and then he would go to the pub and make notes for the rest of the day with a spot of lunch in the pub. And I found that work ethic
Yeah.
very appealing indeed. So that in fact, I think I'd be an expert at that almost overnight. So there are parts of that which I find very attractive. I also love performing whether it be acting or singing, and
Mm.
I would love to do more of that as well. Um, I don't know what the future holds in terms of working, but I definitely will always work. I don't think I'm ever going to be the kind of person who goes, do you know what? I'm just going to go and sit in the sun. I love sitting in the sun, but I think I'm always going to be somebody who wants to work at something, to produce something, to create something, to develop something. That's something I'm always going to want to do. And I'm always going to want to stand in front of people and talk and deliver and make speeches and ram my opinion back down people's throats. That's always going to be something I'm going to want to do. And um, I also like working with people. Your
Yeah.
good self, Anne Harris, who's dutifully listening to all this waffle, and the other members of our team and the trainers and the people we've worked with over the years. You look back on it, it's been a hell of a ride. So, and I don't think I'm ever going to want not to do that either. However, whenever you do something like this, you do change some of your original early
Yeah.
ambitions. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think at some point, maybe now is the time to start bringing some of those things back in before it's too late.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, it's been great being your business partner for 17 years, and thank you for doing your nearly 50 birthday interview. So
Likewise.
here's to, well, maybe the next 50. Maybe you'd beat Peter Drucker, who was lecturing and nearly at around 100. Maybe that's something to aspire to.
Well, I think next 50 would be great, and I'm looking forward to doing your 50th birthday interview in about 15 years. But also, it's worth pointing out to people who might watch this interview that we have a number of leading publications available on the Amazon Kindle platform that they could immediately buy now for a relatively low fee. And of course, our double act, which has been successful for 18 years, is completely bookable for conferences and all sorts of things. So
we are available.
They shouldn't shy away from that action, should they?
No.
No. So, well, thank you for your time, Jeremy. Thank you for asking those questions, which has been a wonderful treat for me to float down memory lane.
Good.
Next week, I'll be doing my Desert Island Disc, but for now, thanks very much, and I'll see you at some stage soon.